Hello everyone, my name is Marek Stefan. I am Deputy Editor-in-Chief in Polish journal Układ Sił, and this is Warsaw Security Forum first day, and our guest today is Gregiem Melcherem, New Generation Warfare Center from Washington, D.C. Hello, sir.
Correct. How are you doing today?
The Minister Jacek Siewiera, the chief of Polish National Security Bureau, said a couple minutes ago that the NATO countries, NATO members should remember what is the Cold War mindset in a current geopolitical situation. What do you think about these words? You think that we should rethink our attitude, our policy towards Russia, toward China, toward those biggest challenges for our security?
Well, I think the West was seduced into the era of international peace and everlasting peace in the early 90s with the fall of the wall and the dissemination of the breaking apart of the Soviet Union. And I think it was a lack of understanding of the Soviet Union or of Russia, which is, as its basis, an empire that goes back to 1552. And as we saw their behavior, how they treat Ukrainians, how they don't even think they're really people, how they think of the states in the post-Soviet states, the stands, so to speak, Kazakhstan and everybody else as little brothers and sisters, like not really quite full-fledged citizens. You can see that they haven't changed. And so that attitude has been misplaced. And even countries such as Sweden, who were dedicated to being neutral for so long, have recognized that they can't take that stance anymore and are gearing up to join NATO sometime in the near future, let's hope. So I think it's a wise method to say we are back to the future, and we need to go back and think along those lines. Even more so, we don't want to learn the wrong lessons from what's going on in Ukraine, because many things that were done there are not the way it would happen if Russia were to take on NATO or the EU or some of the countries around the periphery. There'd be a different method of operation. But I think it's good advice. I agree with them.
Mm-hmm. What we see now, after almost 2 years after Russia invasion on Ukraine, is that the countries on the eastern flank of NATO have some different perspective for security threats than the another part of European allies in NATO. For example, now Poland spend more and more money for armament and for military. For the other hand, Germany, for example, they suspended some plans to radically increase their military budget. What is your assessment about this?
Well, I think the 2% metric is absolutely the wrong metric. And then you have to look at the absolute value, because you can criticize Germany's level of expenditure. However, they actually are spending more than Poland, even with Poland at 4% of its budget in net because of the size of their GDP. So I think we have the wrong metric. We picked a simple metric that would work amongst the 30 states at the time in NATO. But I think we have to go, now that we have 3 clear geographical war plans being developed by NATO, we know what it's going to take to win in each one of those, and then we need to figure out who has to contribute what. And then that will lead to a more intelligent way of investing the money. Maybe in some countries, such in Germany, they ought to just invest the money into helping other countries be successful than necessarily buy their own. As they themselves once said, not less than maybe 2 or 3 years ago, you really want us to buy a lot more tanks? The Germans, are you sure about that? So I think we're at a point now that we've seen the reality of how Russia might fight, how they could fight a war that's almost like World War I, pushing their prisoners headlong into a battle, using them as cannon fodder, how they can torture local citizens and target civilian targets, as well as their old ways of warfare. You can see it's a range. It's both a future warfare with cyber and sophisticated drones and things along those lines, and operating off a satellite system such as Musk's Starlink, but it's also a very basic war that's almost like World War I even, in some aspects of it. So we need to be ready to respond to both aspects of that, and we need to identify what the real military and larger social requirements are to prevail in that war.
Mm-hmm. You think that the Western societies, especially in Europe, understand those challenges and the aspect of especially the military aspect of these challenges, and you think that societies in Germany or and other countries in Europe decided to approve this decision to increase the military spending, national military spending in their countries?
Well, I think that there's two aspects of it. One is, what do you need to do your Article 3 requirements to defend your country? That's the first aspect of it. And then, as I said, how do you plug into the overall NATO whole in order to support these 3 war plans from the north, middle, and south of Europe? And I think that's the appropriate way to do it. And then you can come back and say, okay, here's the requirement. And then it's up to the leadership, the president and prime minister of the countries, to get people to invest the right amount of money, whatever it is, to prevail. You know, Poland at 4%, is that the right amount? Maybe not. I mean, maybe Germany should be, like I said, maybe Germany should be investing in something as part of it. And by the way, it's possible, as you've seen, air defense has been a big issue in this war. NATO actually had a combined program. It was a NATO procurement program that bought the air defense systems back in the 60s. It was called the Hawk Belt. And that was a NATO procured program. And so they ought to be thinking about that. Okay, there's a minimum you want to have for self-defense if you feel you have to have it. Obviously, eastern-facing states feel a much stronger need for that self-defense than a western-facing state. But then you have to say, what do you need to contribute to NATO to win? And maybe more of these things should be bought collectively by and owned and operated by NATO itself in cooperation with the individual states. And that might be a better way to proceed. I think there's another element of it that is not discussed enough when we haven't seen it, and that is what I call non-kinetic. That's the information war, mis and disinformation aspects such as cyber or things that people call hybrid warfare. Russia is using all those tools to dismember our societies if they can. They want to bring down, they want to kill the liberal democracies. They want to bring us down to their level so where we won't challenge them anymore. They don't necessarily. Some countries they want to have back, as Putin articulated his vision for reconstituting something like the Soviet Union again. But I don't think he wants to go all the way to France or anything like that. But nonetheless, he wants to bring it down so we will no longer hold him accountable, so he can proceed it the way he wants to, as I've said before, the empire that started in 1552.
Mm-hmm. My last question to you, you are an expert of modern warfare. So, in your opinion, for us, for NATO countries, what is the most important lesson from the battlefield of Ukraine for us, for NATO?
It's a tough question. There are a lot of people who are saying, learn this lesson and learn last lesson. In fact, I would even challenge the lesson that we need to buy a huge amount of more ammunition. Maybe in this war we do. But in this war we tied, and frankly the Biden administration is directly responsible for this, we tied to both hands behind their back. We didn't give them tactical aviation. We didn't give them long-range strike weapons. If Russia was invading NATO, we would be striking every single possible target inside of Russia to prevent any of those weapons from getting to the front. We didn't do that here. We let Russia shoot at us, at Ukraine, with impunity. We didn't give any long-range weapons to counter it. And then we let them spend, by slowing it all down, we gave them about a year to build all those fortification and minefields, and now they're stopping the Ukrainian advances. Those things aren't going to happen in a war with NATO. So I guess I'm not willing to say what the right lesson is yet, because we have to filter that in terms of what is really best for a NATO defense as opposed to a Ukrainian defense in a different type of war that was fought by Putin and the intelligence services. It wasn't conceived by the Russian General Staff. They actually advised against it. But the Russian General Staff isn't fighting the war along the lines of the doctrine that the Russians and before that the Soviets put together. That's a completely different conflict than the one you just saw. And it will look much different in many, many ways. So be very careful. But of course, there's some obvious things you saw. Drones, for example, that's obviously that's going to be part of any new war. The ability to control the satellites and communications is another good example. Those lessons will be true in any type of conflict. But other things, maybe not so true. So we have to be careful on what we do. And I guess my last comment is go back to my point about while we are so focused on the war on the ground in Ukraine, our societies are under major direct attack with the goal of taking them apart, bringing them to Putin's level. And we have to recognize that as serious a threat to the NATO nations and an Article 5 violation, in my opinion, as much as in a kinetic attack.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.